Picture this for a moment. For more than 2 decades, Vladimir Putin carefully built what many analysts once considered one of the most calculated geopolitical strategies of the modern era. The logic behind it was simple, disciplined, and brutally effective. Russia would bind Europe to its vast energy resources, making Western sanctions politically difficult. NATO would remain strategically focused on Europe rather than expanding deep into Asia. And across the Pacific, Moscow would quietly cultivate strong trade and technology relationships with Asia's industrial powerhouses, particularly South Korea and Japan. It was a strategy rooted in patience. South Korean semiconductors flowed into Russian industry. Russian oil and gas revenues powered the Russian state and military. The relationship between Moscow and Seoul was never built on warmth or friendship. It was transactional. But that transaction made the relationship durable. And for years, it worked until Putin himself shattered it. Because right now, something remarkable is happening behind the scenes of the Ukraine war. South Korea, one of Asia's most technologically advanced economies and home to some of the world's most sophisticated weapons factories, is considering a move that could dramatically reshape the strategic balance of the war in Ukraine, not by sending troops, not by firing a single bullet, but by joining a financial and military support framework so strategically powerful that Moscow is already issuing warnings of retaliation. Stay with us because what's unfolding here is far more than a diplomatic headline. It's a quiet but massive shift in the global balance of power. And if you want deep geopolitical breakdowns like this every day, make sure you subscribe to me, BCC News. Turn on notifications and stay ahead of the stories shaping the world. Now let's rewind for a moment. To understand why South Korea's next move matters so much, you first have to understand what Putin originally built and what he is now losing. For nearly 20 years, Russia's Eurasian strategy operated on 3 pillars. First, Europe would remain dependent on Russian energy. Gas pipelines like Nord Stream made Russian supplies central to European economies, turning sanctions into a politically risky move for Western governments. Second, NATO's focus would remain largely on the Atlantic world, preventing a deeper Western military presence in Asia. And third, Russia would cultivate deep economic relationships with Asia's advanced manufacturing economies, particularly South Korea. South Korea's industrial technology was valuable to Russia. Semiconductors, precision machinery, automotive technology, these were all sectors where Seoul had global leadership. In return, Russia offered energy, raw materials, and a large consumer market. For South Korea, maintaining that relationship also carried another advantage: North Korea. Moscow had influence in Pyongyang. Keeping diplomatic channels open with Russia helped Seoul manage one of its most dangerous security threats. So South Korea walked a delicate diplomatic tightrope, publicly criticizing Russian actions while quietly preserving the economic relationship. Then came February 24, 2022, the day Russian tanks crossed into Ukraine. In that moment, the entire structure began to crack. South Korea joined Western sanctions. Export controls were imposed on dozens of strategic products, including semiconductors and advanced manufacturing equipment. Russia responded by officially designating South Korea as an unfriendly nation. The first fracture had appeared, but even then, neither side fully severed ties. Russia still needed South Korean technology. South Korea still needed to manage its relationship carefully, especially to prevent Moscow from strengthening North Korea's military capabilities. That fragile balance continued until September 2023. That's when Vladimir Putin met Kim Jong-un at Russia's Vostochny Cosmodrome in the Far East. The images alone told the story: 2 leaders shaking hands over what was clearly a military partnership. Soon after, intelligence reports began surfacing. According to South Korea's Defense Intelligence Agency, more than 33,000 containers of military equipment were transferred from North Korea to Russia. Artillery shells, rocket systems, military hardware, shipments flowing through North Korean ports toward Russian forces fighting in Ukraine. For South Korea, the alarm bells were ringing. Then the situation escalated even further. In June 2024, Putin traveled to Pyongyang and signed a formal mutual defense pact with Kim Jong-un. This was no longer a transactional relationship. It was a military alliance. And then came the moment that truly changed the strategic calculation. Western intelligence agencies confirmed that approximately 14,000 North Korean soldiers had been deployed to Russia's Kursk region to fight alongside Russian troops. For Seoul, this crossed a red line. North Korean soldiers gaining real battlefield experience in modern industrial warfare. And in return, Pyongyang could receive advanced Russian military technology, missile guidance systems, submarine technology, perhaps even nuclear-related expertise. The war in Ukraine had suddenly reached the Korean Peninsula, and that brings us to today. In early 2026, South Korea is considering joining NATO's Prioritized Ukraine Requirements list, known as PURL. At first glance, it sounds technical, but its implications are enormous. PURL is essentially a coordinated financing system created by the United States and NATO to supply Ukraine with critical military equipment faster and more efficiently. Instead of every country running separate supply chains, participating nations pool financial contributions into a single coordinated mechanism. Those funds are then used to purchase weapons systems and equipment, often American-made, and deliver them directly to Ukraine. This dramatically accelerates the supply process, and the scale is massive. According to NATO leadership, PURL has already funded around 75% of Patriot missile systems delivered to Ukraine and roughly 90% of missiles used in other air defense systems. But there's a problem. Ukraine's needs are enormous. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that around $15 billion will be required through this program in 2026 alone. And that's where South Korea comes in, because South Korea isn't just another economy. It's one of the world's most powerful defense manufacturing nations. To understand how powerful, consider this. The United States currently produces roughly 90,000 artillery shells per year after ramping up production due to the Ukraine war. South Korea's production capacity exceeds 200,000 shells annually. From a country of just 51 million people, that is the result of 70 years of constant military readiness against North Korea. And it created one of the most efficient defense manufacturing ecosystems in the world. Weapons like the Haus K9 Thunder self-propelled howitzer, a system capable of firing precision artillery rounds and repositioning within seconds, often before enemy radar systems can even detect the launch. Or the K2 Black Panther tanks, one of the most advanced battle tanks ever built, with active protection systems capable of intercepting incoming anti-tank missiles mid-flight. These systems are already transforming Europe's defense landscape. Poland alone has signed defense contracts worth more than $12 billion for South Korean tanks and artillery systems, and the implications stretch directly into Ukraine. As South Korea supplies modern equipment to NATO countries like Poland, those countries can transfer older Soviet-era weapon systems to Ukraine without weakening their own defense posture. South Korea becomes the industrial backbone supporting Ukraine indirectly. Now imagine adding PURL membership on top of that. Suddenly, South Korea is not just an indirect supplier. It becomes financially integrated into NATO's entire Ukraine support architecture. And Moscow is watching closely. Russian officials have already warned that South Korea's participation would cause irreparable damage to relations between the two countries. They've even hinted at retaliation. But retaliation carries risks. Russia's only meaningful leverage over South Korea is North Korea. Accelerating military technology transfers to Pyongyang could punish Seoul. But it could also create a much bigger problem for China, because Beijing does not want a stronger, more unpredictable North Korea armed with advanced Russian technology sitting right on its border. That creates a strategic dilemma for Moscow. The very retaliation it threatens could destabilize one of its most important geopolitical partners. And that's the irony at the heart of this entire story. Putin deployed North Korean troops to support his war effort in Ukraine. That decision pushed South Korea closer to NATO, and that shift may now strengthen Ukraine's defenses even further. A chain reaction Putin himself set in motion, and the consequences are still unfolding. We'll continue tracking South Korea's final decision on PURL, Japan's growing involvement, and the broader geopolitical shifts reshaping the global balance of power. Because stories like this don't just explain today's headlines, they reveal where the world is heading next. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to again subscribe to BCC News. Turn on notifications and stay with us as we continue bringing you the deep strategic analysis behind the biggest global events. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think South Korea will officially join NATO's Ukraine support system? And what impact could that have on the future of the war? We read every comment, and we'll see you in the next report.